Long-time lurker in this sub, first-time poster. I've been umming and ahhing about posting this for a long time and finally decided to write this down. This is an experience that myself and my friends mention every so often and bring up to new people we meet, purely because of how utterly bizarre and unsettling it was at the time. About 3 years ago, back when I was still at university, I would routinely come back to my hometown and visit my friends for weekends or nights out. I didn't live too far away, at most an hour on the train, so it was quite easy to back and forth, hence why I came back so often. I could jump on the train to see my pals, then, at the end of a night out, hop on the return line and make my way back home. On one of these nights, I'd had a bit too much to drink, and as a result, I'd missed the last train, which was at about 1:30 a.m. Because I was the only one that had to get a train home, everyone else had planned to stay out longer, so I joined them. In the end, we left the nightclub we'd been in when it closed at 3:30 a.m. At this point, everyone else started to go their separate ways and head home, and I was left with my friend Jamie. Now, I knew that there wouldn't be another train until maybe 6 in the morning, so the only real choice I had was to stay at Jamie's house or hang around at the train station for hours and hours until the first one of the day arrived. In the end, I decided to do a little of both. Jamie has a cat, of which I'm quite heavily allergic, so I didn't really want to sleep in his house. So in all my drunken wisdom, I decided to walk him home, then head back and wander the streets until the McDonald's by the station opened and started serving breakfast. Not exactly my brightest move. Now, I'm not the type of person to say that my hometown is a bad place, but there are quite a few areas known for being really rough. They're the kind of places that you don't really want to find yourself in on your own. Jamie lived close by one such area, but wasn't exactly in it, so at the time, I thought I'd be alright. Had I been sober, I might not have decided to wander about on my own. So I walk him home, say goodbye, and amble off into the night. At this point, it's past 4 a.m. and the streets are dead as anything. The street lamps are still on, so everything has that kind of orange tint to it, but because of the shadows, the alleyways look dark as fuck. After a while of aimlessly staggering around, I start to feel a bit nervous. Despite having a rough idea of where I am, I'm quite drunk and mixing up some of my directions. I start to worry that I've somehow ended up in one of the rough parts of town, and my brain convinces me that down every alleyway there's a guy with a knife looking to stab me for my phone. I start walking quicker and decide to cut down onto Perry Street. While still heading in the same general direction as the station, this road veers off at a slight angle, meaning that it's the long way around. The benefit of walking on this road, though, is that it's much wider than the others in the area, and, in my mind, this means that anyone lurking in the shadows would need to cover more of a distance to get to me. Again, in all my drunken wisdom, I decided to walk in the middle of the road instead of on the path. My logic being that it's so late/early that no one's driving, and I'm as far away from the alleys on either side as possible. Now at this point I'm getting more and more uneasy. I keep thinking that I'm seeing things moving on either side of me, so I'm constantly stopping and turning to check, only to find nothing. Every time I do it, it makes my heart beat faster and faster. I realized that everything I was seeing or hearing was almost certainly my imagination, but that didn't stop me from getting nervous. That was when I heard the clicking. It sounded distant, like it was coming from the road parallel to me. Because of how much my mind had been tricking me, I stopped walking and listened for a good long while, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. But it was definitely there. And it was getting louder. Looking around, I tried to figure out what was making the noise, but couldn't see anything. I started walking again, this time much faster than before. As I did, the noise got louder. So again, I stopped and looked behind me. When I did, however, the sound stopped and all I heard was silence. Suitably freaked out, I sped up my pace, and the sound started again. So I turned around and came nose to nose with this guy on a bike. Needless to say, I bricked myself. How had he got up behind me so fast without me noticing? I still have no idea. The best way I can describe him was weird. His hair was hanging in an odd way and seemed too big for his head, which in hindsight leads me to believe that he was wearing a wig. His eyes were wide like he was high on something, and his mouth was twisted into a really weird smile. His t-shirt was stained with something, and over a pair of cut-off jeans, he was wearing a tutu. Not once losing the smile, he leaned over his handlebars, getting as close as he could to me, and whispered, "Are you scared of me?" At this point, I was shitting myself. Even now, I can think of 1,000 things I could have, or maybe should have said to him. But instead, all I could manage at the time was, "A little bit, yeah." And then he laughed. Not a chuckle, or a snicker, but a full-blown cackle. Swinging his bike around, he sped back down the road behind me, all the while laughing like a lunatic. I didn't move an inch until I was sure he was far enough away, and even then, I could still hear him laughing. Needless to say, I was out of there as fast as fucking possible. Every so often, as I ran back to the town center, I would hear the click of his bike chain and freak out all over again. I was convinced that he was following me from the next road over and checking where I was through the alleyways. Once I reached the town center, I spent the entire rest of the night and morning pacing up and down the road in front of the McDonald's and train station, scared out of my wits. I never did see him again, but at the time, that made it way worse. If I had seen him, I would have at least been aware of where he was coming from, but only being able to hear his bike, I was terrified that he would appear out of nowhere the same as he did before. I've since been able to laugh about it, and as I mentioned at the start, it's become kind of a favorite story in my friendship group. In hindsight, the idea of a guy in a wig and tutu riding his bike at night seems kind of funny because of how strange it is. But at the time, I was scared out of my fucking mind. Needless to say, I never wandered the streets drunk and alone again. Or in general. First time poster here. Back in 2012, when I moved 1,200 miles away from my home state, I didn't know anyone in the area. Despite being a rather introverted 22-year-old, I thought it would be good for me to get to know some locals. After joining Meetup.com, I browsed several groups until I found one that looked perfect. It was a nearby holistic healing center where they held events ranging from Tibetan singing bowls to psychic fairs. Given my lifelong interest in things of the alternative nature, I was excited by the thought of making some new, like-minded friends. I signed up for the next event and attended a few days later. Upon my arrival, I was enchanted by the scent of incense and abundant good vibes. The owner was warm and kind as she introduced herself and the other attendees. Everyone I met was genuine, inclusive, and made me feel very welcome. I'm someone who's incredibly close with my family, and it was my first time living alone and far from home. For these reasons, it was wonderful to feel such an instant connection with others. I had a great time getting to know everyone, and before I left, the owner, Rebecca, invited me to come back. That turned into me soon frequenting the center 4 to 5 times a week. Early on, I met a guy named Rodney at a Reiki circle. Reiki is a Japanese relaxation technique. He was a middle-aged man who was at the early stages of balding and kept his long hair in a low ponytail. His skin was tan, and he was in good shape with muscular arms. Compared to my petite frame, he towered over me at about 6 feet tall. Following the Rike, everyone would always hug one another and chat. Rodney was the first to come over and give me a very long, tight embrace. As we spoke, he told me how he was a single father and introduced me to his teenage son. The three of us headed off immediately. Rodney and I seemed to have a lot in common, from our love of raw vegan food to scuba diving. It felt like I'd met a kindred spirit, and the energy he exuded was calm and peaceful. He was easy to trust and open up to. Over the coming months, I became Reiki certified and was spending a lot of time at the center. There was a core group of us that became inseparable. Rodney was always part of the gang. We would hold full moon ceremonies at the beach, drum circles at night, and healing sessions by day. Once a week in the evenings, we would go to Panera to get some tea and enjoy each other's company. All in all, it was a very fun time in my life. As time went on, I would see Rodney often. We would meet at farmers markets. I volunteered to help him run a haunted house attraction he was managing and attended his yoga classes while he was getting his instructor's education completed. Rodney and I developed a deep friendship, but nothing more than that. After all, I didn't have those feelings for him. I never got the impression he did for me either, and I was close with his girlfriend who seemed to be very much in love with him. If anything, I would say he was more of a fatherly figure to me. For all these reasons, I let my guard down. A year later, the lease on my apartment was ending, and I decided to move in with my boyfriend who lived about 40 minutes away. The distance, combined with a busy new job, left me with less and less time to visit the center. Eventually, I stopped going other than the occasional trip to their little gift shop to buy sage and crystals. Rodney and I kept in touch a bit through Facebook, mostly him liking or commenting on my photos. Life happened, and it had been about 2 years since we'd last seen each other in person. One day, I was on my lunch break at work and went to a nearby grocery store to get some summer rolls. As I walked by the coffee bar, I saw Rodney and his eyes lit up while he opened his arms wide. I was given one of his infamously long hugs while he slowly rocked back and forth. He told me I looked great, and we caught up on what we'd both been up to since we saw each other last. I explained how I started another job not far from the center, so I'd be in the area again. He told me that he and his girlfriend, our mutual friend, had broken up. Apparently, she was incredibly needy and insecure, which seemed untrue, as I knew her pretty well. And then he started to tell me about his new business plans to teach rich, older women yoga. After all, they're lonely and neglected by their husbands, so they want to be touched. Taken aback by his intentions, I continued to listen as he went on. I have a private studio space now. You should come by sometime. We can lay naked in the sun and do some stretches. It would be very healing. I was beginning to feel very uncomfortable. Then again, perhaps I was overreacting. After all, this guy was a total hippie, so it probably didn't seem strange to him. Myself, being flustered and unsure of what to say, said, cool. Pulls out my phone. Oh, hey, I'm running really late for work. I need to get going. It was nice seeing you. He leans in again to give me an awkwardly long hug, and then kissed me on the lips, something he'd never done before. A few weeks passed by, and Rodney had sent me some texts and Facebook messages about getting together. I lied and said I couldn't because I was busy with my job. Although I felt creeped out by the whole situation, I tried to rationalize with myself that I was being overly dramatic. After all, I'd known this guy and his son for years, and he'd never done anything to betray my trust. Despite avoiding that grocery store since we last bumped into each other, I had to go back a couple weeks later to get a specialty item. Since it was a different day of the week, I was certain I wouldn't see him there. Wrong. Avoiding the coffee bar area, I made my way through the back aisles. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder, followed by Rodney saying my name from behind me. Despite being unable to shake the anxiety I was feeling, I slowly turned around with a forced smile and said hello. Once again, another long-ass hug. He then told me he wanted to hire me for a project he was working on, knowing that I was having a bit of a tough time financially. I have a vision for the space I'm working on. I'll do yoga poses naked and have them shot in black and white. I'll hang the pictures in the studio. I want you to be the photographer. He knew full well that I used to be a photographer. I paused for a moment and told him I wasn't sure if I'd be able to do it. Most of my equipment is up north, and I don't have the lenses I would need. Another lie, but I really thought we were friends and didn't want to jeopardize that with some weird Leo/Kate Titanic-ish photo shoot. Then he tells me he's sure whatever lens I have will be just fine, and I should stop by the studio tomorrow after I'm off work. He gave me the address, and I tell him I really wouldn't be able to stay long as I need to get home to let my dogs out. Still, he insists I should check the place out, that he wants to give me a tour, and that he cannot wait to show me. The next day I drove by the location on my way home, contemplating on whether or not I should go in. My brain kept telling me it was fine. I knew him well. I knew his son. He was a harmless hippie. But then why couldn't I shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach? So I decided to turn around and went straight to my house. Once I was home, he called me 9 times that same night, but I didn't answer. In the messages, it sounded like he was really angry, but was trying his hardest to come across as calm. The following day, he called me 14 times, mostly just calling and hanging up repeatedly. After about a week, the calls stopped completely, and I put the whole situation in the back of my mind. Fast forward to a few months later, I'm at the center chatting with my friend Rebecca, who owns the place. We're catching up for a while when I ask her if she's seen Rodney lately. Her eyes become stern, yet panicked. He's not allowed to come here anymore. You need to stay away from him, she warned. Curious to know more, I mentioned how the last time I'd seen him, he was acting rather strange. I proceeded to tell her about the photo shoot he wanted to do at his new spot downtown. Again, she looked deeply concerned and let out a long sigh. What she told me still shakes me to the core. Apparently, right around the time when he wanted to do our photo shoot, he'd gotten arrested for beating the shit out of his new girlfriend. So badly that Rebecca teared up as she described the injuries that put her in the hospital. Not long after, he was arrested a second time for sexually assaulting another woman, as well as other drug-related charges. She continued on to inform me that he never had any intention of opening a studio. He was totally broke and couldn't afford the lease, but he did know the guy who owned the building. Rodney had a key to look after the place while the owner was out of town. Rebecca knew all of this because she was good friends with Rodney's ex-girlfriend, who told her everything while she was in the hospital. My mouth dropped, and my heart sank when I heard all of this. A person that I'd known for years had attacked women and purposely fabricated a story just to get me alone with him. One of the scariest parts to me is that I'm usually a good judge of character, and he had me completely fooled for a long time. It really made me question my instincts and gave me a lot of trust issues. At least in the end, I did listen to my gut feeling. Not to be dramatic, but it could have saved my life. It's terrifying to think of what his intentions were for me that night. In retrospect, I can see other situations that should have been red flags. I guess hindsight really is 20/20. Looking back, there were things that I overlooked which all make perfect sense now. Maybe for some, the outcome seems obvious, but at the time I thought he was a great person. Perhaps my younger self was naive and too trusting. All things considered, I can certainly say that I'm much more cautious now. I'm sharing this story in the hopes that even just one person will learn something from my cautionary tale. Update. While obtaining verification documentation, I discovered that Rodney is a sexual predator and had a felony warrant issued shortly after our encounter. This story happened back in the late 90s when I was in 2nd grade. At the time, my uncle, my mother's younger brother, was enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Due to the nature of his job, he constantly traveled to other parts of the world. He was frequently stationed in different countries, sometimes for years at a time. Since he was usually so far away, my family didn't get to see him very often. My mother and him were very close, and I had a special relationship with him as well. Every time he visited a new place, he would send me a gift. A magic lamp from Saudi Arabia, castanets from Spain, rosary beads from Notre Dame, and so on. It was always a lot of fun, and I treasured the time we spent together. This particular year, he received some time off and informed us that he would come to stay with us for the holidays. I was beyond thrilled to be seeing one of my favorite relatives. One day, while both of my parents were at work, he decided to take my brother and I to a nearby mall. At the time, my brother was 12 and I was 7. We had a good time going to the various stores, getting lunch, and watching skateboarders at an indoor park. Although my uncle loved us dearly, I wouldn't exactly call him the most attentive babysitter. While the three of us were heading out, my brother and uncle were much further ahead of me. Both of them walked extremely fast and seemed to be engaged in their conversation. Being a very small girl for my age, combined with having Lyme disease, it was difficult for me to walk at their pace. As hard as I tried to catch up with them, I only seemed to be falling further behind. Suddenly, from the left side, I felt someone grab me. It happened in an instant, and my mind raced while trying to process what was happening. Looking up, I saw him. A face I recall clear as day, even 20 years later. He was an old man, perhaps late 70s, but his face was horribly disfigured. All of his skin hung low and poured over his other features. What I remember most was his nose, which was more of a giant tumor, so large it covered his entire mouth. Looking back, it's now clear that he had elephant man disease. The man didn't say anything to me. Instead, he crouched down to my level and put his face just inches in front of mine. Then, he made the most intense eye contact I've ever experienced. Both of his hands were wrapped around my arms so tightly that I winced in pain. Abruptly, he began shaking me, as if forcing me to look at him. I was so paralyzed in fear that I couldn't make a sound. For some reason, I simply stood there, frozen and staring directly at him. While this was happening, the mall was by no means empty. People passed by, but they either didn't notice or didn't care. After about a minute, which seemed far longer, adrenaline got the better of me and I violently wriggled from his grip. In tears, I moved briskly as I could towards my uncle and brother. Luckily, the man didn't follow me. By this time, my family members had finally realized that I was gone and both turned around while I approached them. Their backs were towards me during the entire encounter, so they had no idea what just occurred. I didn't say anything to either of them because I was afraid somehow I had done something wrong. When I got home, I had the bruises from where the man had grabbed me. I hid them from my mom so I didn't have to explain what happened. The incident left me so traumatized that very night I went vegetarian. In my 7-year-old mind, every time I looked at meat, I would think of that man's face and the way he stared so intently at me. I would have nightmares that he was coming back for me, and I was petrified to go back to that mall for many years after. Now that I'm an adult, I look back and wonder what exactly transpired. Did he want to kidnap me? Was he tired of being ignored by society? Perhaps he had dementia? I'll never know. Even though I have empathy and wish him well, I also take solace in the fact that we will probably never meet again. Disclaimer: I in no way, shape, or form want to speak ill of individuals who have any type of deformity or condition. The story's just my recollection of an event that occurred when I was a child. Keep that in mind with your comments, as I wouldn't judge someone based on physical characteristics that they can't control. I'm a huge fan of this subreddit. I've never posted before though, so go easy on me. My story takes place 19 years ago. I'm a female and I was 16 at the time. I'm 5'7". I was about 130 pounds, and I like to think that I'm strong, but I couldn't take on 2 young men. So, it begins with my mother and stepfather going away on vacation and leaving my 17-year-old sister and I home alone. They did this quite often. My parents weren't winning any parenting awards. My sister and I didn't get along either. She was a nasty piece of work. Luckily, she decided to go stay at a friend's house while my parents were away. I was nervous about being home alone, so I had my boyfriend staying with me. He was a pugnacious dickhead, but I'm glad he was there. One night, Brett and I were at my house, and we'd just started messing around when I heard a really loud knock at the door. My room was in the basement, but at the landing area between the stairs. You know how some staircases are broken up and there's a turnaround area? That's the landing. There was a window that I could see the stairs that led up the alcove of our front porch, and I could see 2 people standing there, and just as I was peeking out to see them better, one of them saw me. I remember feeling the breath sucked out of my chest. There were 2 young men standing on my porch, and it was almost midnight, and I had no idea who the hell they were. The guy that saw me let his friend know, and they both looked in the window and asked me to come to the door. My boyfriend had gone upstairs to open the door, and I remember freaking out because I told him not to. He was one of those dudes who thought he was Mr. Tough Guy and believed he could fight anyone. He was telling the guys to leave just as I joined him at the door. They saw me and called me by name and asked for me to let them in. Brett told him to fuck off. One guy, I think his name was Wes or Les, something like that, said, "Come outside, we just want to talk to you," to my boyfriend. I said, "No thanks, we're going to bed," and shut the door. I was really confused and getting very frightened. They stood on my doorstep for a few minutes, and then started knocking again. Wes, or Les, explained to me through the door that he was my sister's friend and that she had told him that I was home alone and that they should come by. I knew my sister and I believed them. That didn't, however, make me stupid. I told them to leave. They started kicking the door. It was shaking and I seriously feared that it wouldn't hold up. I was so scared that I ran into my kitchen to call the police. I was assured that they would be there very soon and to lock the doors and stay on the phone. Meanwhile, Brett was still yelling at them, which only served to piss off these guys more. I begged him to shut up, but he wouldn't listen to me. I was locking all the doors and windows upstairs while Brett went downstairs to check the doors. Down in the basement, there was a huge mudroom area, and it had a thick wooden door made of 2x4 planks, kind of like a barn door. The door had a big old lock on it, some spring-loaded turn bolt, and also had a plank to set across it, like a barricade. One of the guys was pounding on that door, and Brett heard him tell the other guy to try the back door. This stupid door was one of those 1960s things that had a happy little square window right at the face level with a little curtain across it. I was at this door, trying to jam a chair under the flimsy knob when I looked up and saw the unnamed guy just looking in at me. I screamed, and the dispatcher asked me if I was okay. I barely squeaked out that one of the guys was looking right at me through the window. He was older than me, probably about 20, and he was tall and looked scary as hell. His dark eyes were drilling into mine, and he wore this creepy, placid smile on his face. I'd never seen this man before, but he knew my name. He tapped on the window with one finger, never breaking eye contact, and said, "Becky, let me in." I couldn't breathe. The knob was rattling as he was messing with it. He said again, "Let me in, Becky. I just want to see if you're okay. I just want to talk." He stared at me. I didn't say anything. I was just 3 feet from him, with my back pressed to the fridge, when he suddenly started beating on the door and screamed, "Let me the fuck in this house. If I have to break in, I'll kill you both, so just open the fucking door." He looked maniacal. Then there was a loud knock at the front door, and the man went silent. He gave me the most hateful sneer I'd ever seen. I heard shouting, and he ran down the back stairs and into the woods along the back of my yard. Brett had gone to the door. It was the cops. There were 2 female officers at the front door, and one was just starting to raise her voice asking where I was when I came to the door too. I was so relieved I started sobbing. I told them they'd run away through the woods. Luckily, the woods weren't deep. They actually ran along the bank of a large river, and there was a bridge just up from where the woods met the road. One officer ran around the back while one stayed to get a description and take my statement. Officer number 1 came back and spoke to officer number 2, said she saw them running across the bridge. They both left in a hurry, hopped in the cruiser, and sped off. I was still crying and shaking, but I was absolutely furious at Brett for riling them up. I went to make myself some tea, thinking of all the ways I would kill my sister when she got home. I had so much anger, fear, and adrenaline pumping through me that I could have ripped her to shreds at that moment. 20 minutes later, the cruiser came back. There were 2 guys sitting in the back seat, and the officers wanted me to confirm it was the right guys. I looked through the window and saw them. They still looked terrifying to me. They were in cuffs and couldn't get to me, but I wouldn't get close to them. Neither would look at me. I confirmed it was them, and we spoke a bit. I told the cops about my sister suggesting that these 2 men come see me. Officer 2 kind of mumbled, "What a bitch." I had to agree. I pressed charges for attempted forcible entry, property damage, they'd broken a window in the living room, trespassing, disorderly conduct, and attempted assault. Initially, they both pled not guilty, but later admitted to some of the charges. They both got 18 months in jail and were forbidden to contact me or my boyfriend ever again, and to be at least 500 meters from me at all times. I never heard from them again. I confronted my sister about it, and she, of course, denied it, then laughed about it. Laughed at me. She was an awful person. I have no idea what their true intentions were, as they maintained that they were just there to talk to me. I'm thankful I didn't have to find out. This happened about 6 months ago. I was 22 at the time, and my daughter was only 4. I lived in a 2-story house with just myself, my daughter, and my husband. I was taking at-home classes to be an iPhone specialist, starting at 5 p.m. and ending at 10 p.m. Monday to Friday. My husband had left for his 2 weeks of training he does every year for the military, so it's just me, my daughter, and our pit bull mix, Mavis. I just finished my classes for the week and had the weekend free, so I decided to go to my mother's house until Sunday. So I packed up my stuff and my daughter's stuff, and we went for the weekend. We returned home Sunday to find someone had broken into our home. There are muddy footprints and windows open, but nothing was missing. I was going to call the police, but my sister's husband explained that the cops wouldn't do anything. Nothing happened that night, but the next day my mother came over to pick my daughter up so I could do my classes without worrying what she was into. They left, and I went to watch the class upstairs. I put my headphones on so I can hear my instructor teach the class, but swear that I keep hearing stuff downstairs. I even texted my mom and told her I heard stuff downstairs and that it was creeping me out, but she assured me that it was probably just Mavis because everything was locked up tight and no one could get in. I agreed, thinking I was probably just freaking myself out. I continued listening to my instructor teach, and I swear I heard footsteps on the stairs, so I hurry and take my headset off and listen. I couldn't hear anything. I walked down the stairs and didn't see anything either, so I went back to class. At 10 p.m. my class was over, and my mom decided to just keep my daughter for the night. I was doing my homework with Mavis upstairs with me, and all of a sudden she started barking and growling and ran downstairs. Now, Mavis usually barks and growls at the slightest noise outside, so I didn't think much of it, but decided I should check it out anyway because of what happened while I was at my mother's. Again, nothing out of the ordinary, so I went back upstairs. I was finally done with homework, and it's about midnight, so I went downstairs and called my mom, like I do every night. We were talking, and I decided to open my daughter's door and peek my head in. I don't know why I did this, because my daughter was at my mom's for the night. Just a habit, I guess. I should have mentioned earlier that when you look in my daughter's room, her bed is on the far wall, a good ways away from the door, so you can clearly see under the bed. So I opened the door, and to my horror, a man was under her bed. I just froze and didn't move, just stood there in shock. After what felt like minutes, I slowly shut the door and whispered into the phone to my mother that there's a man in my house under my daughter's bed. My mom was terrified, and she screamed at me to get outside and stay on the phone with her. She had my brother call the police, so I ran outside with Mavis and waited for the police to arrive. About 3 minutes later, they came and searched my house and found no one, but they discovered my bathroom window was open, and they happened to shine their light at the living room window, and I could clearly see 2 huge handprints where they slid the window down. The cops waited for my mom and brother to get there, and while we're waiting, told me about this man that usually stays 2 houses down from mine with his parents. Both of his parents have a pretty bad drug habit, and this guy's been known to put women in the hospital and try to kill them. What scares me even more is since we bought this house, my daughter's been terrified and always told my mom she wanted to stay with her because it wasn't safe at mommy's house. I didn't think too much of it because I thought maybe it was just a new place, and you know how kids are with new places. After this whole thing happened, I stayed with my mom until my husband came home. We decided to ask our daughter about the house, and what she told me absolutely terrified me. She said that at night, while her dad and I sleep, monsters come to her window and try to get in. She says it's a boy monster and a girl. The next day, we installed alarms on all the windows and security lights. I can't stop questioning why. Why was this man under my daughter's bed? Was he waiting for me to go to sleep? Was he waiting for my mom to bring my daughter back home and for me to put her to bed? I get sick to my stomach thinking what could have happened. If you made it this far, I hope you'll follow me on Twitter at KingSpook Creepy.